Get out! We're better off without you. My daughter Sarah screamed those words so loudly the crystal glasses on the dining table vibrated. Then, without warning, she swung her hand. The slap landed across my left cheek with a sharp, stinging crack. The entire room went dead silent. My son-in-law David stared down at his half-eaten turkey. My 2 grandchildren froze in the living room. I am Amelia Foster. I am 68 years old, a widow for 10 years, and until tonight, I was the primary financial pillar holding up my daughter's comfortable suburban life. I didn't reach up to touch my face. I didn't cry. I simply looked at the woman I had raised, realizing I no longer recognized her. The argument had started over something trivial. I had quietly declined to pay for her family's upcoming spring break trip, suggesting they use their own savings. In Sarah's mind, my money was her money. My refusal was an insult. Only one person moved. My son Julian, who had flown in for the holidays, threw his napkin onto his plate. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Grab your coat, Mom." Julian instructed, his voice low and dangerous. He glared at his sister. "You just crossed a line you can never uncross." Sarah folded her arms, her chin held high, waiting for me to break down and apologize. She was accustomed to me keeping the peace. She expected me to swallow my pride to maintain family harmony. Instead, I buttoned my wool coat, picked up my purse, and looked directly into her angry eyes. "Fine," I replied evenly. "You won't have to see me again." I turned and walked out the front door into the freezing December air. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't need to. The loud thud of the heavy wood closing shut was final enough. What Sarah didn't realize as she watched my car pull away was exactly how much power I carried inside my small leather purse. Snowflakes drifted onto the windshield as Julian drove us away from the 2-story colonial house. It was a house I owned, though Sarah and David occupied the main floors, while I lived in the smaller attached mother-in-law suite. For the first 10 minutes, neither of us spoke. Julian gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "Are you okay?" he finally asked, glancing at my reddened cheek. "I am perfectly fine," I answered, staring out at the passing streetlights. And it was true. The physical sting was fading, replaced by a profound, crystal-clear sense of relief. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text message from David illuminated the screen. "Sarah is just stressed about hosting. Let her cool off. You can come back, and we'll eat dessert. Just don't mention the vacation money again." I read the message twice. There was no apology. There was only a directive on how I should behave to make their evening smoother. For years, I had absorbed their financial burdens and their emotional outbursts, because I thought that was what a good mother did. When my husband passed away, he left me well off. I bought this property to keep my family close. I paid the property taxes. I covered the major repairs. "They expect you to go back," Julian muttered, reading my expression. "They expect the ATM to dispense cash," I corrected gently. "They don't expect a person with boundaries." I slipped the phone back into my pocket without replying. I didn't feel the need to argue or defend myself. Arguments require 2 participants who respect each other, and tonight proved that respect was entirely absent. I mentally reviewed the automated payments scheduled for the next week, the premium grocery delivery service, the shared credit card Sarah used for her household necessities, the high-speed internet package. "Take me to my side of the house, Julian," I requested. "I have a few errands to run online before the night is over." Julian walked me to the separate side entrance of my annex. The house was quiet. Through the shared wall, I could hear faint music playing. Sarah was carrying on with Christmas dinner, entirely unbothered by what she had done, assuming my departure was just a temporary tantrum. I sat down at my small kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank portal. First, I found the joint credit card account, the one I had opened years ago to help Sarah build her credit, which had slowly morphed into her primary way of funding designer clothes and expensive dinners. I clicked the Settings tab. Remove Authorized User. Confirm. Next, I opened the joint emergency savings account. The funds inside were entirely mine, placed there just in case the house needed a new roof or the kids had a medical issue. Over the last year, Sarah had dipped into it for stress relief weekends. I transferred the entire balance back into my private individual checking account. I checked the clock on the wall. It had been exactly 1 hour and 55 minutes since I walked out her door. I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, savoring the quiet warmth of my own space. Right on cue, at exactly the 2-hour mark, my phone began to ring loudly against the wooden table. The caller ID flashed Sarah's name. I let it ring 3 times before sliding my finger across the screen to accept the call. Mom Sarah's voice was frantic, the earlier arrogance completely wiped away. I heard chaotic background noise and a stranger's voice speaking sharply. "Please, Mom, come back. The caterer is here to collect the final payment for the dinner and the card is declining. They're threatening to take the food back. You have to fix this." I took a slow sip of my tea. The chamomile was perfect. "The card isn't broken." "Sarah," I replied, my tone conversational, "I canceled your access to it." Silence stretched over the line, broken only by the caterer in the background asking for a different payment method. "What do you mean you canceled it?" Sarah hissed, lowering her voice to hide her panic from her guests. "Mom, this is humiliating. Stop proving a point and transfer the money. We can talk about the slap tomorrow. Right now, I need you to pay for this. You told me you were better off without me." I reminded her, keeping my voice entirely devoid of emotion. "I am simply respecting your assessment. If you are better off, you can pay for your own Christmas dinner." "Mom, please. I don't have the funds in my checking account right now," she cried. "Then I suggest you ask David for his credit card," I answered. "Good night, Sarah." I ended the call and switched my phone to Do Not Disturb. Julian walked into the kitchen, leaning against the door frame with a slight smirk. "Caterer." I nodded. She tried to pay the remaining balance. It seems reality is arriving faster than she anticipated. "Do you feel guilty?" Julian asked, watching me closely. "No," I answered honestly. And I didn't. For years, I had confused being supportive with being used. I had allowed her to treat my generosity as a baseline requirement and my presence as a nuisance. The slap hadn't broken my heart. It had broken the spell. I closed my laptop and washed my teacup in the sink. I knew the real storm wouldn't hit tonight. It would hit tomorrow when the adrenaline wore off and Sarah realized the consequences were permanent. I dried my hands on a towel, feeling a strange, profound sense of peace. Tomorrow, I was going to teach my daughter the true cost of independence. The heavy knock on my side door came at 8:00 a.m. sharp. I was already dressed, sitting in my armchair with a book. I unlocked the door, and found Sarah standing on my porch, holding a travel mug of coffee. Her eyes were puffy, but her jaw was set tight with lingering entitlement. She pushed past me into my small living room without an invitation. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing last night was?" she demanded, turning to face me. "David had to empty our personal savings to pay the caterer. We have nothing left for the rest of the month." "That sounds like a budgeting issue," I observed, closing the front door to keep the cold air out. Sarah's face flushed. "You can't just cut me off, Mom. It's abusive. If you don't turn that card back on, I won't let you see the kids. You won't be allowed over to our side of the house." It was her ultimate weapon, the threat of isolation. A year ago, that threat would have sent me into a panic, begging for compromise just to read my grandchildren bedtime stories. Today, it sounded remarkably hollow. "That is your right as their mother," I agreed calmly. If you feel I am a danger to them, you should keep them away. But understand this: using my grandchildren as leverage will not unlock my bank account. She blinked, entirely unprepared for my lack of resistance. She'd expected a negotiation. "You're really going to let money ruin our family over one little mistake?" she asked, trying to shift the blame back onto my shoulders. "You struck me across the face in my own home," I corrected her. "That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. And my choice is that I am no longer funding people who abuse me." I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up a single sheet of printed paper, turning around to face her. "Take this," I instructed, holding it out. Sarah frowned, snatching the paper from my hand. Her eyes scanned the neat rows of text and numbers I had compiled earlier that morning. "What is this?" she asked. "That is a list of the household expenses I cover," I explained, returning to my armchair. "The property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, the premium cable package, the high-speed internet, the landscaping service you requested, the bi-weekly house cleaners." David walked through the door just in time to hear the end of my list. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Amelia, let's all just calm down and talk about this rationally." "I am perfectly rational, David," I assured him. "I am transferring the utility accounts, the internet, and the cable into your names. The auto pay from my accounts will cease on January 1st. "Mom, we can't afford all of this," Sarah yelled, the paper trembling in her hand. "You know David's salary doesn't stretch that far. Then you will need to cancel the services you cannot afford," I suggested. "Like the cleaners. And the premium cable." "You can't do this," David interjected, trying to sound authoritative. "We have an agreement." "We had a mother helping her daughter," I corrected. "We have no legal lease. You pay me no rent. I am legally the sole owner of this property. I am choosing to stop providing complimentary luxury services. I suggest you call the internet provider today, or it will shut off at midnight on the 31st. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult them. I simply presented the unbending architecture of reality. They had built a comfortable life on a foundation of my money while convincing themselves they were entirely self-sufficient. Sarah crumpled the paper in her fist, her face pale. "You're doing this just to punish me." "I am doing this to protect myself," I answered. "Now please leave my apartment. I have plans for the afternoon." By noon, I had made 4 simple phone calls. The internet company, the cable provider, the electric company, and the landscaping service. I did not require a lawyer. I did not need a dramatic legal battle. I simply verified my identity, stated my account numbers, and scheduled the cancellation of my services for the end of the month. I spent the afternoon at a local cafe with Julian, enjoying a quiet lunch. My phone vibrated a few times with text messages from my sister Claire. Sarah called me in tears. "She says you're making them pay for the house cleaners and they're going broke." "Amelia, is this necessary?" In the past, I would have called Claire, immediately exhausted myself explaining the situation, and tried to manage Sarah's reputation. Today, I typed a brief response. Sarah slapped me in the face at dinner. I am no longer paying her bills. "Hope you had a nice holiday." Claire did not reply. I assumed the shock of the truth was enough to silence the family gossip mill. Sarah had always thrived on controlling the narrative, painting herself as an overwhelmed mother and me as the demanding grandmother. Once the physical assault was on record, her narrative collapsed. Julian watched me set the phone down. "You're handling this better than I thought you would. I grieved the daughter I thought I had. I admitted picking up my fork. But I refuse to be held hostage by the daughter I actually have." When I returned home that evening, the main house was dark. I noticed David's car was parked haphazardly in the driveway. A quick check of my email showed a confirmation from the travel agency. The final payment for Sarah's luxury New Year's ski trip had bounced because the joint card was closed. I smiled softly to myself. I knew exactly what tomorrow would bring. The text message arrived the following morning just as I was making breakfast. Mom. The travel agent called. The card on file for the ski trip isn't working. The final payment is due today, or we lose the deposit. I know you're mad, but the kids were really looking forward to the snow. Please just authorize this one charge. It was a classic Sarah maneuver. When intimidation failed, she pivoted to using the children as a shield. She didn't apologize. She simply demanded access to the funds, wrapping it in the guise of maternal love. I wiped down my kitchen counter, picked up my phone, and typed a precise reply. I cannot authorize the charge. I used those funds to book a 2-week Mediterranean cruise for Julian and myself. Have a good week. Less than a minute later, my phone rang. I declined the call. It rang again. I blocked her number for this weekend. I didn't need to hear her scream. I didn't need to absorb her misplaced rage. I had drawn a boundary, and for the first time, I was defending it with action rather than words. I spent the weekend packing away a few sentimental items in my apartment. The silence in my annex was beautiful, but the proximity to the main house was beginning to feel suffocating. I realized that as long as we shared a roof, even a divided one, Sarah would always view my presence as a safety net she could exploit. I looked around the lovely, quiet space I had created. I loved this property, but I loved my peace of mind more. On Monday morning, I did not call a lawyer. I did not call the police to report the assault. I opened my laptop and searched for the contact information of a highly recommended real estate agent in my area. On Tuesday afternoon, a well-dressed real estate agent named Marcus stood in my living room taking measurements. I had invited Sarah and David over under the strict condition that they sit quietly and listen. They sat on my small sofa, looking bewildered and anxious. As I mentioned on the phone, I am the sole owner of the title to this duplex, I told Marcus, signing the listing agreement on my coffee table. I want it on the market by Friday. Let's price it competitively. I am looking for a quick sale. Absolutely. Mrs. Foster Marcus smiled, taking the paperwork. I'll have the photographer out tomorrow. Marcus let himself out. The moment the door clicked shut, David stood up, his face flushed with panic. You're selling the house? David asked, his voice cracking. Where are we supposed to go? That is for you to decide. I answered, remaining seated. I am giving you 60 days' notice to vacate, which aligns with the state requirements for month-to-month tenants, even non-paying ones. If you wish to buy the house from me, you can submit an offer through Marcus. We can't qualify for a mortgage this size, Sarah shouted, finally finding her voice. You know we can't. You're making your own grandchildren homeless. I am doing no such thing, I countered smoothly. You have 2 incomes. You will simply have to find an apartment that fits your actual budget rather than the budget I provided for you. I suggest you start packing. Sarah stared at me, searching my face for the mother who used to fold under pressure. She found nothing but calm resolve. You're really choosing money over your family, she whispered bitterly. No, Sarah, I replied, standing up to open the door for them. I am choosing myself over an abuser. You told me to get out. I am simply following your instructions. Now please leave. I have boxes to pack. The house sold in 3 weeks. The market was hot, and a young investor bought the duplex with cash. Once the reality set in, Sarah and David had no choice but to scramble. Without my financial padding, they couldn't afford a house in the same upscale neighborhood. They ended up renting a modest 3-bedroom apartment in a neighboring town. I didn't stick around to watch them move. I bought a beautiful sunlit condominium 30 minutes away, closer to Julian. It was smaller, easier to maintain, and entirely mine. There were no shared walls, no unexpected guests, and no tension lingering in the hallways. 4 months after Christmas, a handwritten letter arrived in my new mailbox. It was from Sarah. She wrote about how difficult the transition had been, how much she missed my help with the children, and finally, a request for a small loan to help cover their new higher rent. Buried at the very bottom was a half-hearted apology for losing her temper during the holidays. I sat on my new balcony sipping coffee and read the letter twice. I felt a brief flicker of sadness for the relationship we could never have, but I didn't feel guilt. I took a pen and wrote a brief response on a plain card. Sarah, I love you and the children. I forgive you for the physical assault. However, I will not be providing any financial assistance. Please do not ask again. I mailed it that afternoon. I didn't need to destroy her life. Her own financial reality had done that for me. I didn't need a grand revenge plot. The most powerful thing I could ever do was simply walk away and let her carry the weight of her own life. I returned to my quiet condo, locked the door, and smiled. I had finally learned that my peace was not negotiable, and my presence was a privilege, not a right. If there's one thing I've learned from this entire experience, it's that true family doesn't require you to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. For years, I confused enduring disrespect with being a supportive mother. But setting a boundary isn't an act of revenge or cruelty. It's simply an act of self-respect. Sometimes the most necessary thing you can do for an entitled person is to step aside and let them meet the real world. You are always allowed to protect your peace, and you should never have to buy someone's love. Remember, your presence in someone's life is a privilege, never a right. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story today. If you could relate to this, or if you've ever had to make a tough choice to protect your own peace, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. Please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real, honest stories about family boundaries and finding your own strength. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never be afraid to stand your ground.